Thank you for joining us here on the Frank Sontag podcast. We drop every Friday, pretty consistently on YouTube and all the usual places. I do have an in-studio guest who I'm going to tell a very short story, and then we'll begin the interview. So we are broadcasting from the San Fernando Valley. This is the place that we do all of our podcasts. It's around the corner from basically where I grew up, and my high school is down the street, Notre Dame High School. I graduated in '72. Didn't spend a whole lot of time at the high school after I graduated, but I did go back to my 50th reunion a couple of years ago. The man sitting across from me was there, and I had heard a lot about him. Then he was the president of Notre Dame High School. He's got a lot of irons in the fire, does a lot of things, but I would say near the top, if you're a Rams fan, you would know this guy, and he is the voice of the Rams at SoFi, among many other things. Sam Lagana, welcome to the Frank Sontag podcast.
Hey. Hello, Frank. Whose podcast? It's your podcast.
My podcast. How are you?
It's a good day to be me.
It is. And we had a little chance to kind of get caught up. We have some mutual friends and historically running in circles. So I'll start with the obvious, and then we'll see where we go from there. You have an LMU basketball shirt on, and I had told you I know somebody that played way back in the day. And, of course, you just made a dinner reservation with him because he's a good friend of yours. So talk a little bit about why you have an LMU basketball shirt on.
Well, this is kind of a very bizarre thing. I went to Loyola Marymount as an undergraduate, did some broadcasting and, announced and did some coverage of Loyola Marymount basketball back in the 80s and into the 90s when your good friend, who is the all-time leading three-point shooter in the history of the NCAA, Jeff Fryer, was part of that team. So I got to share some of those experiences with that great group of young men and those people whom supported those young men. But the reason I'm actually wearing the shirt is because I am involved as an alum. I'm a donor, and they invite me to host the Hall of Fame, and I go to basketball games and other sporting events because I like basketball, and we'll probably talk about this later. I chair the John R. Wooden Awards, and so that's a great experience. But the reason I'm wearing this shirt is because of the fires. And during the fires, our home was compromised, and we're unable to live there, and our clothing and stuff was compromised. And so Loyola Marymount actually just recently sent me a couple of things that could fill my wardrobe because there wasn't much of a wardrobe.
Wow.
And so it was just really sweet. And I thought, I'm going to wear this today.
It's really nice gear.
It is. It's really sweet. And it was nice. And here I am. And I think I was just sampling it to see if it got a reaction because I'm going to go to the basketball game on Saturday with Jeff Fryer now. As he called you, and I took the phone call, and then I asked him if he wanted to go to the game. So probably could ask you, Frank.
Yeah. Anybody that is a local here in SoCal and has been here for a while, that was a extraordinary team. You said you did some broadcasting. Sadly, that was the time that Hank Gathers passed, Bo Kimball. I mean, I remember Pierce Steamer. I remember that whole team.
Tom Peabody, the Human Bruise.
Tom Peabody was flying everywhere.
Paul Westphal.
Yeah.
Paul Westhead.
And had them running and gunning.
Yeah.
So that must have been a bittersweet time for you.
Yeah, it was great to watch the acceleration. So you had a good program a couple of years before that. We had Forrest McKenzie and Keith Smith, and things were kind of moving along, and the team was competing well for championships in the WCC. Gonzaga had not become the gargantuan program that it is today. They had gargantuan men playing, but they didn't play at the level that Mark Few has this group playing at today. And Loyola Marymount was doing good. Ed Gorgin, guy out of kind of the Glendale, Pasadena area, was the head coach, and they were kind of rocking and rolling. And then lo and behold, it came time to have a new coaching change. And actually, Jim Lynam was hired first. And Paul Westhead's daughter, Monica, was a student at Loyola Marymount. Paul had been the coach of the Lakers, which practiced at Loyola Marymount. I happened to be Monica's next door neighbor in the residence hall. And so Paul would come over, and rather than sit in the girls' apartment waiting for the girls, he would sit in our apartment and talk to me. And I was taking Shakespeare, and he would help me.
Oh, my goodness.
And just, and we were friendly, if you will. But he was a candidate, after we left the Lakers, he was a candidate for the LMU job. And it came down to Jim Lynam and Paul Westhead, who are two guys that knew each other from St. Joe's in Philadelphia and were good close buddies, had both been in the NBA. Lynam takes the job, and like 3 weeks later, and this is coming up on graduation, so it's probably the end of May-ish, if you will, and Monica's having a graduation party that Paul and Cassie are throwing, if you will, and Jim says to Paul, I'm going to take the job with the Philadelphia team at that time. And Paul looks at me, you're kidding. He goes, yeah, you should probably look at this. Well, Brian Quinn had just been hired as the athletic director 3 or 4 weeks before this. He made the hire of Lynam over Westhead. And the next day they make a phone call, and Paul Westhead is going to replace Jim Lynam. Wow. And then all of this starts to happen with the incredible offense that they ran, which, it was just like these 5 streams of energy going down the court at great rates. But I'm going to tell you this, and I always say this, it was the defense that made the offense work.
For sure.
And Jay Hillock was the assistant coach, and they really pushed a hard man-to-man defense, full court trapping at times, 3-quarter trap, half-court traps, and it forced the opponent to try to turn the ball over fast. And if they got past the half-court line, let them have the layup, get the ball and go for the 3 and get Jeff Fryer the ball. And everybody ran their lanes. And that's when you really learned about lane basketball back in those days.
Yeah.
Stay your lane.
Yeah. And then we fast forward now, 50-some years later, if you will. The game has changed in an extraordinary way. I'm not going to get too deep in the weeds. One of my good friends is the head coach at ELAC, and his kind of popularity became prominent when Netflix did Last Chance U. His name is John Mosley. Mm-hmm. Wonderful guy. In fact, they got an 18 or 19 game winning streak right now. He teaches a high post offense. The guy actually coaches versus run and gun, which is kind of the game now. Either it's dunk or everybody posts at the 3-point line and shoots. And for me, I'm kind of a purist. One of my mentors is Jim Herrick.
Yeah.
I'm a UCLA guy. And it's Coach Wooden would freak today. He was not happy back when he was around watching all the dunks in the show. He would freak if he saw what the game has turned into now.
Well, that's probably very true. And he ran a strong double post low offense, if you will, for the most part, where you're posting up, setting up the picks, and then the guys roll out and then get that ball out to the guard and, try to draw everybody down. And then, somebody like Bill Walton or Lou Alcindor would be there to rebound the ball in their day. But, that high post, don't forget, he ran some high post offenses with those guys to pull people off.
He did. But
that double post was really important to him, where he stacked them up and then tried to trap you into the brick wall.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. Sam Lagana is my guest. Reminiscing about the UCLA days in the 70s and Coach Wooden, tell me a little bit about how you became the chairman of the John R. Wooden Award Foundation.
Yeah, I lost a coin flip. And no, just kidding. It's an interestingly long answer, but I'll give it to you as best I can.
Okay.
I was a young guy, just entering my teens. My father passed away. My mother wanted something for me to do that would not get me in trouble. I was a highly energetic kind of guy, liked playing sports and so forth. And so my mom said to one of her friends at the tennis club that she decided to join because she wanted to have a social life and she wanted to have sports after my dad died. She asked this guy if he could find something for me to do, because he was involved with the LA Athletic Club, and the LA Athletic Club owned the tennis club my mother.
Where'd you go to high school?
Palisades.
You did go to Pali. Okay.
Yeah. And so Dub Harris was his name, so he dragged me along, and I was picking up whatever it was that I was told to pick up and move boxes and do starting stuff. So I'm a kid, and that's what I'm doing, and love basketball. And we would hop on the 76 bucks back on that day in the RTD, and we'd go from Pacific Palisades, where we lived, just straight down, and it would drop you off at Poly Pavilion, and we'd go watch UCLA, and a bunch of my buddies, could be ball boys, and got to know Coach Wooden. But I was working on this Wooden Award thing just as a schlepping boxes or whatever they told me to do. And later in my life, the LA Athletic Club hired me to work in one of their other properties at the California Yacht Club and at the LA Athletic Club. And they had given me a key to the Riviera Tennis Club to come in the back gate from Paul Revere, and I could get, not get in trouble, and I would help out. My friend Steve Hathaway, his family, basically built out the LA Athletic Club, the Riviera, the California Yacht Club, the Pacific Coast Club, the California Gun Club, and some other stuff. And so became fast friends with him as a younger man. I guess I had to mature a little bit earlier than some. Mm-hmm. But when I was in college at Loyola Marymount, I worked down at the Yacht Club and stayed in touch. And lo and behold, one day I get a phone call from Steve saying, "Hey, would you be interested in coming to the LA Athletic Club? And we could use some help in our athletic program." And I was in athletic administration. And I thought, well, this would be kind of interesting. And I made kind of a off-quip comment. And I said, well, as long as the Wooden Award's involved in what I got to do. And he's like, oh, absolutely. And I'd been working and helping out. And Duke Llewellyn, who founded the Wooden Award with Coach Wooden and some other folks, they were all on board. Duke had been the previous athletic director 2 before me, and he was, I think, the 3rd in the history since 1880. And so that put me at like 5 or 6 and, in the stream of things. And there was a guy between us, Jim. And so I came in and started to reinvigorate sort of the sports idea at the LA Athletic Club as opposed to just fitness. Let's get back to having sports teams.
Yep.
And the Wooden Award was a big part of taking it. And I had been involved in beach volleyball and televising things. And I said to Duke, let's ramp this thing up. I kind of have a philosophy, Frank, that it's let's go big. We're not settling for mediocrity. And either you do it or you don't, And you got to try. You got to just keep trying and not just try to go for mediocrity.
And for not only mediocrity, but for people that know you or know of you, you've got an infectious spirit and you're all about positivity.
Yeah, thank you. I try. That's probably something I learned from Coach, right? Failing to prepare is preparing to fail,
my
right?
Goodness,
all
yeah.
those kinds of things. I wrote those things on my girls' lunch bags, right? Like when they were growing up. But yeah, those kinds of things. And Coach was a lot about that, right? And so I got to know Coach as we were working our way through putting this show on. We moved from Fox to CBS to ESPN and different programming and a couple different sponsors as things go around. But the key is to remember Coach Wooden in the Wooden Award. But really what it's named for is John Wooden, the basketball player. In 1932,
Purdue.
He was, correct, Purdue. He was the very best basketball player in America.
Yep.
And he was named the very best player in America by the Helms Bakery, which celebrated that. And Helms Bakery went out of business in the 70s, in the mid-70s, and that's about when the Wooden Award was created in 1975. And it just coincidentally happened that Helms went away and this came in, and Duke kind of led that whole thing for a long time and did a great job. And then I was honored to be, executive director and then vice chair. And then when Duke died and Coach died, which happened to be the same day, unbelievably, the committee voted me as chair, and I've sat in that really intimidating seat since then. And, trying to keep relevance and what's important in the game, which is, 1, you're going to college. 2, you're playing basketball for the team. 3, you're showing initiative of good character. 4, you are a person of completeness. And those things really make the Wooden Award special.
He was a special man, no doubt.
Yeah.
Amen. Sam Lagana is my guest. So in my background, I didn't go to college to get into radio. I went to college to play ball and do other things we don't need to talk about now. But radio opened up to me in the 80s, and I've spent a few years behind the microphone. And anybody that listens to the way you talk can tell you've spent a little time behind the mic too. We're going to get to the Rams in a minute, but how did broadcasting, of all things, kind of enter into your world? Let me just tell you, for me, other than an undeniable God moment where KLOS opened up for me, I grew up in LA. I'd have my transistor under my pillow listening to Vin Scully.
Yeah.
He was like the man. And I'm like, I want to do that someday. So how about you? Where did broadcasting come into your life?
So that's a great question. And your entry is fascinating. And to think, yeah, you're a young guy. And Vince Scully was a young guy who was making millions of dollars at that time, not only doing the Dodgers, but he was doing the golf, he was doing the NFL. I mean, he was like the guy.
Yeah.
Right? And so not only did you listen to him on your transistor, but over the weekend, if you're sitting at home after you've played your Friday night basketball game or you're getting ready for your Saturday night game and you're in college, you're watching him doing this. And on Sunday, you're watching him do the NFL, right? Like, incredible character. He has all those same components that John Wooden had to. And so you talk about you liked Coach Wooden, you liked UCLA, you talked about you liked Vince Scully. You're talking about the same kind of cloth those guys had. Mm-hmm. They were in that same vein. And so what a blessing for you to be influenced in that way to find broadcasting.
Yep.
For me, I don't know that it was kind of funny. When I was a kid, I guess I thought about it because a neighbor of mine, Todd, we would sit and we would create newscasts. Tom Brokaw and Harry Raisinnet, and kind of like a Mad Libs.
Oh, that is funny.
Kind of news broadcast where we were kind of just creating our own things on cassette tapes. But I don't know that I wanted to be a broadcaster. We were just trying to find out fun things to do. I mean, we would do roller derby in the driveway. Big John Holland, Ralphie Valadares for your LA Thunderbirds.
Dick Lane.
Right.
Of all people.
I mean, the one thing that I wish I had done in my life is to broadcast the LA Thunderbirds. I would have loved to do. My grandma would take me to LA Thunderbird games at the Forum or at the Olympic Auditorium.
Yeah, I watched them.
Those were just awesome. And you had sport and theater working together. But that's really not how or why I got into broadcasting. So I like basketball like you did. 6'5", lanky. I don't know whether I was coordinated, uncoordinated. I could jump a little bit. But I got hurt playing basketball. I got low-bridged. And for those who don't know, low-bridged is when somebody takes your legs out and you get to hit the floor pretty hard. And so my back kind of didn't react well to that. So I got checked out, and it turned out I have an extra lumbar. And my muscular skeletal system, probably like most 15-year-olds, wasn't developing that quickly. I was a late bloomer, honestly, as you kind of look back at things. But I don't think my muscles held my back together really well at that point. And so Coach Marvin, who was our basketball coach at Palisades, I wasn't able to play anymore. I actually got hurt a couple times, and then they were like, you can't play anymore. You're like, you can't do any of this. You're just getting hurt, and it's not going to be good. We're going to have to fuse your back. And I was like, no, I don't think we're going to fuse the back, because this is about the time Walton was on his first fuse on his ankles, and that wasn't going well. So Coach said, well, go over there and announce the game. You know what's going on.
Interesting.
And so he put me in charge of watching opposing teams and bringing scout information to defend, to the teams. We were pretty good. We had this guy named Chip England who was our three-point specialist. Before we didn't have a three-point line, right? Like you, we didn't have a three-point line. But when I say three-point specialist, by the time he was in college and into the pros, he was just a phenomenal shooter. But he was the mad bomber in high school and in the city. I think he still has the all-time record for scoring in LA City with 2 points, if you will. Because I think there's somebody now that may have eclipsed him that could shoot from the three-point line, but in terms of what he accomplished. So a coach said, go on over there and do that. And so I did. you just like, okay. Sidebar, most interestingly, the gal on one side of me who was like one of the doing stats and scorebook was a gal named Julie. And Julie went on to be the costume designer for the television series Friends.
Oh, my goodness.
And so she did pretty good. And the woman, girl, sitting on my right, her dad was a defense industry guy and a real estate guy. And her mom was just this adorable mom that was sweet to all of us. And she was on the girls' basketball team, was on the golf team. And she's kind of gone on to do a lot of really good things. And her name's Jeannie Buss.
We've all heard of her. Yes.
So
Jeannie's done okay.
Right. And so they would help me because they each had stats and scorebooks, and I just announced. And
oh, my gosh.
And it was just a good time. And that led to when I worked at the movie theater. You've reached the Bay Twin Cinema, located at 15140 Sunset Boulevard in beautiful Pacific Palisades. Today in cinema number 1, Fast Times, whatever it was. Saturday Night Fever, John Travolta. It was classic. And so it just happened. And then when I got to college and volleyball, then the volleyball coach, I just could not continue. My back wasn't sturdy enough. And by the time I got to college, I tried volleyball again, still not sturdy enough. As I said, a late bloomer. And they said, hey, look, we'll pay you to work, study, and help your scholarship. And you can do this and announce at Loyola Marymount. So here I was, and all that kind of worked out. And that kind of led to beach volleyball because we got a new head coach at Loyola Marymount in volleyball. His name was Kevin Cleary, and there was some upheaval in beach volleyball, and I loved volleyball and loved play, and that was something I could actually still play was beach volleyball.
Yep.
Because I didn't get hurt when I played it, and I didn't feel bad. My body just could handle it, and I wound up then joining the AVP at its infancy, heading up marketing, promotions, and public relations, and you didn't know what you were doing, but somebody had to talk to people, and so I just sort of created an announcing role for myself.
So a couple things. When I was studying kind of your bio last night, you've done a lot of different things and are still doing a lot of different things. That really jumped off the page of me. Like, you are very gifted in the area of being able to, what would be the terminology? Learn as you go, and you've got gifts. You've obviously got the gift of oration and broadcasting. As you were talking about volleyball, a guy that played down the street, you reminded me of Paul Sunderland, who
phenomenal guy.
The guy, won the Olympics, gold medals, and then went on to broadcasting. He broadcast the Lakers for a while. Sometimes it's interesting how you're in the right place at the right time when doors open up. I had no broadcasting experience. I spent 27 years at KLOS with the guys, et cetera, et cetera. But it's just interesting how life sometimes takes us in certain directions and on certain paths. So all that to say this, because this is something I don't know, and I just got to believe there's a story here, or you've got stories. So I meet you at Notre Dame a couple years ago, and then somehow I started hearing the Rams. I started hearing Sam Lagana and the Rams, and I didn't know anything. And then I don't know how it happened, but we went to a game, and I hear third down, and I'm like, how do I know that voice? And then I put 2 and 2 together.
Yeah.
So how did the whole Ram thing come into play? How did you're the voice of the Rams at SoFi, and
yeah,
my goodness gracious, that's quite a blessing and quite a challenge, if you will.
Yeah, you know what? It is a blessing. I mean, I have this opportunity to bring Los Angeles together. Like, how cool is that?
Yeah.
And I'm grateful and thankful to, the Lord, like, that's something that kind of presented itself in a kind of a unique way. Like, I was like most people. I mean, I start the Rams, I was a Rams fan at about 5 years old and going to a Rams game with my father when he was alive. And I remember walking through Tunnel 5 at the Coliseum, holding my dad's hand, getting out there and looking out there and all these people, and the Rams were, and it had to be like a September game probably because the Rams were in white for that game. And I remember Roman Gabriel and the Fearsome Foursome. And there was a guy named Bob Klein who wore like number 80 for the Rams. And he was a tight end out of SC, and he went to my church and he grew up in my town. So I knew who he was. And I'm not sure that I really knew who he was at 5, but as I aged and stayed a Rams fan, and my dad would take me once in a while. We didn't have season seats or anything like that, but until the time that he could. So I think I was a Rams fan that way, right? And then they moved to Orange County. And that was a haul, right? Like when you're 18 years old, 17 years old, like
it's another country away.
Yeah, that was the Orange Curtain. Like you couldn't even date girls in Orange County, right? Like that was somewhere that was too far. That was just out there. And so, but I remember going with my friends Norm and Billy and Diego, and we would get in the car and we'd drive down the 405 to the 22 and go to the Big A and watch a Rams game, a couple games a year, and tailgate in the lot. And then they moved again. And, God, that hurt, right?
Thank you, Georgia Frontieri.
Yeah. Well, and
it wasn't just her.
Yeah, and there was others, and probably Mr. Kroenke, because he was a guy from Missouri, and he had some interest, and they were trying to do the best thing for the franchise, right?
Well, sure.
And so, many of my friends became Charger fans, or they left, and I just sort of watched the Rams and kind of went, and then next year, what happens? Eric Dickerson and the Rams just go. I mean, it was unbelievable. It's like, they get to St. Louis and now they're in the Super Bowl. And that was awesome. So you kind of like, I'm still a Rams fan. Of course I am. Like they're winning. They changed the colors to the navy and the Vegas gold color. And that was all okay. And then lo and behold, I'm in my announcing. And so I've done beach volleyball and tennis and all these different sports, college basketball, and I'm doing arena football. And when I was in arena football, I got to work with Casey Wasserman when he started with the LA Avengers.
Yep.
I was like one of the first people hired to work on the Avengers. And, these are only X amount of given dates when you're an announcer. It's not like, hey, I'm singing 50 hours a week. No, I have a full-time job of 50 hours a week, and I'm going to do these things. And there was a guy named Kevin Demoff, and he was involved with the Avengers as well. A number of people that I knew from Fox and different people, and people I got to work with that were just great. We're all going to age at the same rate and at the same time, right? And so everybody's going to wind up doing something, and who knows where you're going to wind up be. Fast forward, Kevin winds up going into the NFL, goes down to Tampa. He goes to St. Louis and becomes the chief operating officer, basically, and vice president of the Rams to Stan Kroenke. And then they negotiate this idea to move to Los Angeles, and Kevin was involved, and I didn't have much of an idea about it until it was, announced. We had heard rumors, but nothing new. And lo and behold, I sort of said to some friends, I was like, yeah, I would love to announce the Rams. Like that was my team as a kid. And lo and behold, in I think it was like in May, I get this email, like, if you're interested in being an announcer for the Rams, record these 7 lines. And, it was like, whatever, Goff to, wasn't Cooper, but, Goff to Gurley or something like that. And,
right.
And so I was recording, and I was like, I wrote them back actually pretty quick. One, it was like, it didn't look right, like on a piece of paper, like it looked chopped. So I didn't know if I was being pimped by my buddies or not, which they have done that before. I mean, they've called and...
Shocking. We all have our stories.
Yeah, I mean, I've been offered jobs at the Olympics and all sorts of things where, some of the most important, impressive executives in America have called me and offered me a job. But yeah, it really wasn't them. And so I kind of thought that my buddies were doing this to me again. But nevertheless, I sent back a quick email to this gentleman, Chris and Corey, to who I was getting this email from. And I'm like, I can't get a studio until next week. I'll send it in then. I get this note right back, basically saying, hey, just record it on your phone. And I'm thinking to myself, there is no way that they want a recording off of a phone. It's going to sound terrible. And I don't want to compromise. Remember I said I don't like mediocrity.
Yeah. Yeah.
I do not ever want to wallow in mediocrity. So I was like, that just would not be acceptable. And so I'm working my tail to find a place I can go record these lines so that it sounds better. So I'm like, think I can get one over the weekend. Just record it on your phone. So then I'm trying to figure out where to record it on the phone, right? And so I'm in my office. It doesn't sound right. There's glass in the wall. I try the bathroom at work at Pepperdine. I was working at Pepperdine. And it didn't sound right there. But then there was a corridor that reminded me of a sound booth between the actual bathroom and the hallway. And it was carpeted, and there was carpet on the walls, and it was just, so I just stuck a do not disturb note on the outside of the door, and I picked up my iPhone, and I recorded the 7 lines, and then I recorded a couple extra things, and I said, it's time for every man, woman, and child to get out of your seat, get on your feet, and rise with the Rams, which is something we say all the time. And
So was it immediate? Did they respond immediately?
No, God, no. I didn't get anything back for, I don't know, 2 months. It's July, and I'm actually at dinner with a guy who I thought was pimping me on this thing, right? We're setting me up. And we're at dinner at Guido's in Santa Monica, and it's West LA, Santa Monica. And we're at Guido's with a bunch of guys. And my friend literally says to me, we're at this table, and it's got, like a, what's it, Lazy Susan on it, and it's an Italian restaurant, and food's moving around. And my buddy Diego says, hey, who's a Notre Dame grad also, says to me, what's going on with that Rams thing? I'm like,
Haven't heard anything yet.
Right. I haven't heard anything.
Ouch.
And in fact, I am planning a trip to go to Thailand for work, and it may conflict if I don't know, and then that would be a real problem. And he's like, oh, yeah, I guess that would be tough. And literally, we finished dinner, I go out to my car, and it's like 9:30 at night, and I get an email. If you'd like to be the announcer for the Los Angeles Rams, we'd like to have you, kind of thing.
Man.
And so I'm like, I look at this and I'm like, this is great. So I text back, oh, this is awesome. I'll come over tomorrow and meet with you. Text comes back. You don't need to do that. We'll just take care of it online. And I write back, no, I want to meet with you.
For sure.
I don't want to do this online. I want to feel like, are we going to get along? Or is this going to work? I don't want to work with somebody that I'm not going to get along with. All those kinds of things. I just don't know these guys. They're all from St. Louis. So I went over and I met with the guys, and we got everything and worked out. And it's like, okay. I went home and booked my trip to Thailand, and we did a couple games, preseason games before it. Dallas Cowboys, 100,000 people in a preseason game.
Yeah.
And that was when another thing worked out. And here I was in the Coliseum, and we're going to play this 1 o'clock game. It's hot. I believe it was a 1 o'clock game, but nevertheless, 2 hours before kickoff, and all these people are outside the Coliseum. Well, I knew that you could hear the way that the sound system is a single source sound system at the Coliseum. So it's all coming out of one speaker bank, and you can hear it all through the park outside, Exposition Park. And so the doors were about to open.
What did you do?
And I said, it's 11 o'clock in the City of Angels, and the doors are now open for Los Angeles Rams football. Welcome to the Rams house.
Well,
and you could hear the roar from outside the stadium. And the first thing I see is this man come through Tunnel 23 across from me, because I'm sitting above Tunnel 7, and I see this man come out holding his son's hand. And I'm bawling. It was the coolest God thing. I could see myself in Tunnel 5 with my dad.
Yeah.
And just that whole emotion of, we're home, we're back. This is our team. This is Los Angeles. And I get to be a part of it.
Yeah, a big part of it.
So cool. And I take that and I say that same line 2 hours before every game for the last 10 seasons, or 9 seasons, going into 10 seasons.
Sam Lagana is my guest. Whew, man, I got
it's long. Sorry.
No need to apologize. I mean, it's part of the reason why I'm doing the podcast is I want this to be extraordinary in that, and I won't go long here, but in my time of doing this, I've studied a lot of people, and I just think even someone that may not have any notoriety, we all have stories. Storytelling is such a big part of life and culture and what connects us all. We live in such a fast-paced society now with social media. Everything is sound bites and how many likes, and you're an influencer. But there's something about the heart of connection and community. And when you started to share that story, I just saw it. People outside the Coliseum, and there you are, and that speaker, and it's just, it brings us together. So, and your phone's blowing up like crazy. Is that normal? I think it probably is. That's your life. And part of it is, I know, and I want to get into this a little bit. The LA Times just did a story on you I was reading last night. So let's go back a little bit. Palisades is home for you.
Yeah.
You were raised in Palisades.
Yeah.
There's a perception of Palisades for people that don't know, whether they're new to Southern California or whether they buy into the buzz of what's being said, where a lot of people think, oh, Palisades, that's where all the rich folks are, that's where Hollywood is, and you were telling a story on the couch before we got behind the microphones. I couldn't be further from the truth, that you talk about community and people that have been there forever, and this is your hometown.
Yeah, this is it. It's everything. It's my girl's hometown. You know, it's my wife's town. It's our town, and there's thousands of people that live in this town, right? Like we got like almost 30,000 people in this town. But I mean, I remember the town was smaller, right? Since I've been in this town since I was a little kid, and everybody who grew up in this town, I think, feels the same kind of way. It's a town. It's a place like where we were growing up of defense workers and school teachers and professors at colleges like Santa Monica or ELAC or, UCLA. In the ingrainedness of Coach Wooden had his basketball camp at Palisades High.
He did.
Right? Like when we were kids.
Yep.
So you were exposed to those kinds of things. And it was going to the park and playing basketball in Herb's League and, at Pally and Herb's League, or you played Little League in the PBBA. And, back in that day, you started in the Bears and you went to the Padres, you went to the Braves, and then you went to the Bombers as you aged up. But you stayed in that same organization unless you got traded or something.
That's right.
You didn't switch tribes. You used that term earlier, but you didn't switch tribes. You were on the black and white team and you were in this, or you were in the red team and you were a Reds, you were a Cardinals, and you stayed in those groups. So you played with the same guys. So if you were awful, like we were on the Bears, you were awful. But you were going to have the first pick in the next year and you might get better because Ted Knight was one of our coaches, if you could believe that, right? Like, as Eric was on my team. And so, you got Ted Knight picking whatever, and Ed Staley and Mr. Staley picking. And you move up to the next group and then you're coached by a different couple of men and even some women. It was Mrs. Bender was one of our assistant coaches. I remember that. It was the Bender brothers. So, it was a community. It was fun. Same with, we played flag football at the Y, right, at Paul Revere. And we would get into, and at that time, again, you talk about overstating communities. Malibu and the Palisades were kind of contiguous. Malibu was not a city. It was not an incorporated part of Los Angeles. Pacific Palisades is the lost child of Los Angeles. Yep. Until recently. Now everybody seems to know about it because of what happened. But we were just a small town in mass society. We were known internally. We had all of these houses of worship, like 15 houses of worship. We had gas stations and we had banks. We had very few liquor stores. It was like a Midwest little town in mass society, right? And Malibu was the same way. Malibu is where big families moved because they couldn't afford to live in the city, and they could be out at Malibu, and Santa Monica High would send buses out to Point Dume where Paul Sunderland lived.
That's right.
And they would go to Samo High unless they got in a car. Can you imagine going from Point Dume to Notre Dame every day?
That's a trek.
Right, like through Canaan and all that. That's what those guys did, like if they went to a private school like Notre Dame, or they were trekking to Samo High, but they would go right past Pali High because the relationship was with that situation. But we played with those kids, and they were just, it was a different time, and the houses were humble. When you talk about 6,800 homes burned down on January 7th and January 8th, 6,800 homes. 2,600 homes are damaged and not livable right now. It's a town of, like, as I said, upwards of 30,000. I think 25,000 people were displaced in those 2 days. Some of them never to go back. We have a little area called the Alphabet Streets, the ABCs. They were named for Methodist ministers. The Methodist Church pretty much founded Pacific Palisades as a Chautauqua, a retreat area, which is the name of the big road that comes off Coast Highway. And they laid out this grid of houses that were 12, 14, and 16, 1,800 square feet because they were all kind of built to military standards. And like I said, a lot of these people worked at Douglas Aircraft or Hughes Aircraft and stuff like that. And you had these little tiny houses and these little tiny streets. 93% of those homes have burned down in just the ABC streets. It's unbelievable when you start to think about it. The area that burned was about 27,000 acres. The island of Manhattan is 14,000 acres.
Yep.
So nearly 2 times the size of Manhattan. Now, not the density, right? We can clearly say not the density. But, the Woolsey fire, I think it was 800 homes in the Malibu. And when I say 6,800 homes, I'm just talking about Pacific Palisades, not what burned in the Malibu, not what burned in Topanga, just what burned in the Pacific Palisades community, not burning in Pasadena, Altadena, Sylmar. There were 5 fires going at the same time. We have 36 firefighters and 69 and 23s, the 2 firehouses. There was no water in the reservoirs. They had been empty for months. Nobody thought, we're going to have a dry season, we'll fill them up. They weren't leaking. They just were fixing the tarps, I guess. But that became a compromised situation, right? But it's a great town, and we grew up, and I think that's the bond, and I'm seeing it even more now in the last 4 weeks. Anybody who grew up there wants to say, I was there. People who played basketball there, came to shoot-arounds. I spent a lot of time there. I swam in the pool at the YMCA. You're just hearing these stories about people that wanted to or felt to be a part of this. And it's tough because, I have a couple of homes that are standing that my friends and I were able to spot fire and get them out on Tuesday night. And then Wednesday, the fire turned around and burned almost everything. When I left at 11:30 on Tuesday night, when the school caught on fire next to my house, I knew it was an inferno. That would be because of the bungalows. Everything was standing. When I returned about 1 o'clock the next day, the fire was burning down like dominoes at my house, and other homes were already burning. And I'm coming up on a bicycle I had borrowed from Leon Sato, who was a volleyball friend of mine, and my neighbor who lived catty corner from me. She had 2 bikes, and we borrowed these 2 bikes, and we went up. And as we came up Arno Way, which is where the Bel Air Bay Club is, to come in the back way, things were just catching on fire right there. This thing burned from the top of the Palisades Highlands. I could see it at 10:37 right there. And it burned all the way down to the Pacific Ocean. But it spread out because as the winds move, we have these onshore and offshore winds, and then Santa Ana's, and then they just creates firestorms. It's unreal. And just see it all burn. Like I said, 10:37, I saw it up here. Starts coming towards us fast because the winds were heavy. By 11:11, there's a fire behind me in the canyon back behind my house. By 11:47, there's a fire in what's called Palisades Drive, which is a canyon over there. And the water dumpers are coming and dropping there. And this is then when people are abandoning cars because both sides are catching fire.
Yeah.
And they don't know what to do. And then Sunset Boulevard backs up. My neighbor, Terry, she got in her car and tried to go out and tried to turn left on Sunset to go towards Palisades High to exit off at Temescal. Palisades High was on fire, so they shut down Sunset going that direction, but there was no traffic mitigation people there. So other people then are just flipping around. And then they get down to Sunset, and it's 2 lanes each way, but 4 lanes going one way, and then people just stop their cars. Now the fire engines couldn't get up. And people were abandoning their cars on Palisades Drive and on Sunset, obviously, because they were scared to death because these things are on fire around them on either side in these canyons. It's hard to get them out. Terry turned around, came back. It took an hour and a half to go what I would say maybe is 3/4 of a mile.
Wow.
But she came home. It was pretty calm. We could see fires, but we had hoses. And so her son, Frank, was there. I was there. There were a couple other people helping us. We were helping people get out. Like, don't panic. Just go this way, go that way, go down Arno, go this way to get out of here. And then about 3 o'clock, the fire engine started to arrive. And then we were helping, trying to get them up because they weren't the 36 men and women who were at 69 or 23. It was the folks that had come to help us from all over pretty much Los Angeles County at that time, and then soon to be the state, right, over the next day. They just got everybody going. And Frank, it was unreal, right? So now we're explaining to fire engines, like, that hook and ladder cannot go up that street because there's no, it's burning up that canyon, and there's no way to turn around. You can go up this street because the streets will go across, but they're not familiar with the landscape. And once you explain it to them, and they can then look on the map on their computer, and they can see what you're talking about, how their safety, because they have to be safe too.
For sure.
And we had water. I have a hydrant at my house. Not my hydrant. It's the city hydrant. Right. But it's right in front of my home. That had water the whole time. We had pressure the whole time. So we were trying to encourage them to fill their pumpers there. My friends who are firefighters at 69, which is in the village, and that's right in the ABC streets, they had to go all the way to 19, which is in Brentwood, at Kenner Canyon and Sunset, to go get water. Because there was no water in the reservoir up on Chautauqua, the top of Chautauqua. And so they didn't have any water. So they needed to go to send their pumper over there to get water. Just crazy.
Sam Lagana is my guest. You know, there's so much speculation, so many news reports, politicizing, all that stuff aside. When you go through something like that, there's a human element to it where you are changed forever. I mean, perspective in life, we relearn what's important, and I don't want to overgeneralize here, but here you sit, just literally a month ago, you experienced something that you probably never imagined you would go through. And yet here you are, recounting, talking about childhood, community, experiencing the night. And there's all this talk now about what's going to happen to that area and who's going to do what, which I'm not even interested in going into. But I do want to ask you, I know part of you coming in today, I just really felt this pressing to have you on the podcast and see where it goes. And I didn't even know you lived in Palisades till you said, hey, I could probably make it, but I've got some car issues. And then you start talking about what happened. I get online. I'm like, oh my God, Sam lived in Palisades. So where am I going here? So in the aftermath, shock, it's still really recent. How are you doing with all of this? And people that you know and love and you grew up with, and I know your home got spared in a matter of speaking, but it's still kind of not sure what's going to happen. So the voice, the up, the positive, the not mediocre voice of the Rams just went through literally hell on earth. And yet here you are.
Yeah, I guess it's... You mentioned connectivity and positivity. Those are things that are really important to me. And I think that when I look at life, and I've had these different kinds of complications in my life, like my father passing away when I was young, my mom not being able to afford the taxes pre-Proposition 13 and us having to move. I think you kind of learn a little bit of resilience. And my mom even passing away what I felt was a young age at 64. And going through that, I was a young man. I'd just taken over the the LA Athletic Club Wooden Awards, and my mom succumbed to basically, she passed away of a complication due to leukemia, and probably nobody expected, including the doctor and everybody. But you go through these complications. We had a fire in '78. I was working on a haunted house at the Palisades Park. I ran to my mom's house, loaded up the bathtub with water and put her silver and china in the bathtub, started spraying down the roof. She wasn't there. She couldn't get into town because she was at work. And then I loaded up the skateboard with pictures and, put them in boxes and then strapped them to my skateboard and brought them down the hill.
Wow.
And, and I happened to grab my camera last, that I had just gotten a camera like over the summer for my birthday. And as I'm coming down the hill, I lived near St. Matthew's Episcopal Church. And I'm coming down the hill and the church catches on fire and the windmill catches on fire. And so I'm taking pictures because I'm like, this is horrible, but I was in the middle of a fire. And I just did what I was told to do. And always, we knew that these fire things are possible, so you were ready. Long way to get to sort of like, how does this? So I'm not sure that I was prepared for what happened. I don't think I ever believed that this was going to take home 6,800 homes. I don't think it was going to danger 2,600 homes and put them challenged. And then there's homes that are okay in different parts of town, but not many, right? Like, we're not talking about many are okay. We're just there. But I think for me, having gone through these different, and then even when we talked about Jeff Fryer, I was involved in the broadcast of the game when Hank passed away. I didn't sleep for nights. I would relive that thing.
Yeah.
What I remember vividly about the outlet pass, he goes up for the dunk, he comes down, and he's turning like this to give Chris the assist flash, and it was like watching somebody suck a milkshake. The energy just went from his head down to his toes. He went down, and I was broadcasting the game in December when he collapsed at the free throw line. And I remember saying to my broadcast partners, one of which one was Mario, and I think Bill was on that broadcast as well. Pretty sure he was. And I said, they were like, what's going on? And I remember talking to Chip, the trainer, excuse me. And, it was like, I said he had the dry heaves because nobody knew what was really wrong. He went down and he was struggling. And it looked like he had the dry heaves and throwing up without throwing up. And I used that terminology, dry heaves, because we didn't know, and I didn't want to say he's throwing up. And lo and behold, that was another challenge, right? Like, we're young. We're just out of college, right? And
we're immortal in a manner of speaking.
Yeah, and you're watching this extraordinary offense that's getting huge amounts of recognition. And then this game against Portland, and it's like, you didn't know he had passed away right away. You don't know that, right? But I wound up in an extraordinary position in that when the athletic director, Brian Quinn, asked me to sit back and be in his office, and he's going to go down to the hospital at Marina Mercy Hospital, which is now being rebuilt as Cedars-Sinai just now, but and wait for a call to find out what's going on. And, I'm a young guy. And so those kinds of things. So I think in all of this, and I'm giving you some crazy stuff, right? But you just don't know. And you can't forecast. You can only have, as Corinthians 13 gives you, faith, hope, and love. And let the greatest of these be love. And live with that. And if you don't live with that, then what are you going to live with? I mean, it's the greatest guidance when you look back at what were the challenges that the Corinthians were going through, and what are they, when he's writing to them, it's like, come on, guys, you got to get it together, because they were struggling in Corinth at that time. So now what are you going to do? Guys, faith, hope, and love, and the greatest of these is love. You've got that. And that's coming to you from the good news, right? And to me, that I think was the most powerful. I think that's helped me get through so much of this and to live with positivity, live with optimism. Some people don't like it. Some people think I'm too optimistic. I had an interview for a job a week ago, I guess. And I remember I was like, I'm so excited about this thing. I think it's great. It's a fundraising role, and it's helping people to actualize what they want to do in a Christian Catholic environment. And so I'm excited about this, and I'm hopeful that it will work out, because I want to help people help other people. That's what I like to do. That's what I even saw that I did even at Notre Dame. I got an opportunity to help people make this world better for these kids, for these alums that can look back at these kids and say, yeah, this is the next generation. How are we going to help people? But nevertheless, I was in this meeting and I was getting so excited for this interview. It really was. And I do have a lot of energy and a lot of enthusiasm. So I realized that I needed to mellow out, Frank. So I called my insurance adjuster.
Oh, that'll mellow you out.
Yeah,
really quick.
but he's been great, and he's been so positive, and he's been so helpful. But I knew that that would take me down to talk about these things, because I can't just look at all of this okay, what do I do here? I need his help. I don't know. This is my first rodeo. Mm-hmm. This is absolutely my first rodeo, and having been affected in the way that I am, to answer your question. It's a long way to get here, but it is the way. But faith, hope, love, greatest of these is love. That gets me there. And then how do we work with these people? Everybody's really trying to do the best thing. No one's trying to really screw anybody else or something.
Yep.
There's this pool, and there's this pool, and there's this pool, and you got to learn it. I got a dwelling. I got this. What's it going to take? I don't know. And many other people don't know either. We know that nearly 20,000 people don't know. Only those who have lived through something like this. I mean, my house is not habitable. I don't know when it's going to be habitable. They got to clear 6,800 lots that may have toxicity. I live near an elementary school. Asbestos, the school was built in the 50s. There's probably asbestos that was flying in the air. I did have a mask on, probably wasn't the best mask. Like a gator from the COVID experience. But I wanted to fight that fire. I tried to put the fire out at the school. I tried to put the fire out at my neighbors' houses. I tried to keep the fire off my house. When I came back on Wednesday, it was attacking it again, as I was saying, and I tried to stop other neighbors' houses as well. But so much devastation. So I don't know how you get through it unless you can look through it. I had joy 7-8 days later when I saw green grass blades coming back up out of my completely burned out lawn. I looked at my roses yesterday. I see greenery coming out of the rose. But that's beyond that rose, complete devastation.
Yeah. So there was a guy in high school, I don't know if you knew the McAveeties, but Steve McAveety was in front of me, and for a number of years, he was Mel Gibson's right-hand guy at Icon Films.
Wow.
And Mel was in on the morning show for Braveheart. Funny short story with Mel. He would not come in and get interviewed unless we saw Braveheart beforehand. So he set up a private screening, Mark, Brian, me, a few people. Man, that was a wild morning. Watching that movie, you talk about change your life, sitting through all of that. So Steve's in studio with Mel, and I say, hey, Steve, small talk, Notre Dame, this and that. So fast forward, you probably know Mel was being interviewed by Joe Rogan the morning of the fire. Mel had a house in Palisades. And so somehow it came up, but Mel just kind of pushed through. And then a couple weeks later, when he found out his home was gone, somebody, I don't know who it was. I should have tagged who it was, because the interviewer asked a very powerful question. So they're asking Mel about your home's gone, how you doing? Mel, I lost everything, sentimental stuff. It's heartbreaking. And then he said, but, and I don't know if you know Mel, Mel's a little different. And Mel says, somehow it's just, God gives, God takes away. It's kind of like a blessing. And the guy says to him, because Mel's getting ready to do resurrection, the guy said, something along the lines of, do you think God's preparing you to do this movie? And Mel's like, yes. And I had to stop for a moment because we have no guarantee of tomorrow. You and I share faith. And for him to say that is so powerful because life is fleeting. We don't know. Your mom at 64, that's very young. We don't know. My second pastor's daughter passed at 8 years old from cancer. We don't know what tomorrow brings, but we know this is the day the Lord has made. And may we be joyous. And a lot of the world doesn't know who he is. And hopefully we emulate his love and share it. That was part of why he came 2,000 years ago. But I say all that to say this, the preciousness of life. You talk about the grass, just little things that, I'll speak for myself, I'll self-convict. I take so much for granted. I get a cold and I'm like, man, I just took my health for granted because I'm miserable with a cold, or I'm in such a hurry I have a men's ministry, such a hurry to get this event going, and we work hard, and versus just stop and spend time with God today. Unplug the phone, spend time in prayer, love somebody you don't know, Coach Wooden. Do something for best thing. Do something for somebody that no one will know you did.
Yeah.
And yet here we are, the aftermath of just a horrendous, nightmarish scenario, and this is life on earth.
It is, but it comes down to work as if everything depends upon you and give thanks to the greater glory of God. Work as if everything depends upon you and give thanks to the greater glory of God. That's all we can do. Robert Browning, great poet, writer, had a poem, Death in the Desert. And in it, he's kind of revealing, it's almost a Candide kind of walk in the world, right? And in it, he's like, progress is man's distinctive mark alone, not God's and not the beast. God is, man partly is, and wholly hopes to be. It's Death in the Desert by Robert Browning, and I'm pulling just a piece of it.
Yeah.
But the important part, progress is man's distinctive mark alone, not God's and not the beast. But that, to me, ties into work as if everything depends upon you, and give, glory and thanks to the greater Lord. But that's the only thing we can do, Frank. How else do we operate, right? We know two things: where we're born, and we're not going to be born. We're gonna go. We don't know those dates. We've heard it in our lifetime. It's the asterisk in the middle that defines the story.
Yeah.
But everybody doesn't pay attention to the asterisks.
Yeah.
Right? Today I was at my house this morning, and so much smoke damage, so much stuff smells terrible. I don't know if even the books are just awful. And I was looking at the books and I was like, okay, I can get some of these books cleaned. They tell me ionized and then cleaned or whatever. And some people say that it'll never work. Okay. But I'm looking at all these books, and I was thinking about these books today as I was looking at them, like, is this one I want to keep? Or is this one maybe we give away or we throw away or whatever? And I started thinking about the effort that the people put into these books.
Oh, yeah.
And it's that asterisk.
Yeah. Yeah.
They're telling you a story, their story. Why? I mean, some of the ones that popped out at me were, some of these different books that I was looking at. Condoleezza Rice's book. Mm-hmm. And I was always impressed with Condoleezza Rice, and she's at Stanford now and, went to the University of Denver. And I was always fascinated by Condoleezza Rice. Maybe because she is friends with Gene Washington, who was one of the great, athletes out of Long Beach and then for the San Francisco 49ers and so forth. I don't know. Maybe that's why. I don't know. But, Pete Carroll's book and Mike Krzyzewski's book.
Coach Carroll.
Christopher Nance had a book, like The Weatherman. And I have his book. And looking at these different books as I was like, okay, yeah, Jerry Tarkanian. I was thinking, I don't need this book. But I do. I really enjoyed reading that book because it gave me a different perspective.
Yep.
And then all of these books by John Wooden.
Coach had a few.
Right. And I was looking at character books and different things. I'm like, nope, we're keeping this. Nope, we're keeping this. My son-in-law should read this. Someday my grandson should read this. But it's all about that asterisk, in the middle. Because we're going to start here and we're going to end there. And hopefully we're going this way.
Yeah. So I think this relates. As you were sharing that, I think I had told you on the couch, I went to Notre Dame, not a good experience. All boys, struggled, home life was in disarray. I got bullied big time as a junior. And one of the shining, life-changing moments, I'm so emotional, was a teacher named Gary DeCosca. And he taught something that I picked up you and I have a mutual love for, and that's Shakespeare. Mm. I took his class. I was trying to be the dumb jock, have people like me, all that stuff. And he was different. And the thing that stood out initially, he loved teaching Shakespeare. I mean, you talk about energy and storytelling, and you walk in that room, and I remember the first couple of days because I hung out with some of the players. We're like Romeo and Juliet. Oh man! But then within about 2-3 days, it's like I can't wait to get back into class and have Professor DeCosca just teach us about the Capulets and all the stuff and. Shakespeare is pretty amazing stuff. Tell me about your love for Shakespeare.
So it's interesting. And this morning, there was the blue Shakespeare book that I used, my first collegiate Shakespeare book on my bookshelf is still sitting there. And I'm not getting rid of that thing.
For sure.
No, it was sitting next to my torts book from my first law class too, but I'm not getting rid of that either. And my creative writing book. But the Shakespeare's, I think, I remember, so I mentioned Candide.
Yep.
I remember reading Candide before that. I have the Candide book too still. So why have I held on to these things? I don't know. They've traveled with me. I haven't lived in that many places, but they've traveled with me since I was 18 years old, right? So why do I still have them? I don't know. There's meaning in them, right? But the Candide book, the best of all worlds, really is what that comes down to, right? And you learn about the struggles of life in Latin America and making their way north, and why is Candide going to do this, right? But the Shakespeare books are the similar kinds of stories, right? And yet you have this British guy who's writing about these Italian areas, all up in pretty much the Veneto, the upper area of Upper Italy, right? Long before that's going to be the centerpiece of World War II, right? That Veneto was just an incredible part of the story of World War II in terms of, the different kinds of conflicts that Mussolini and the Italian people and the Germans and all of that. But you go back all the way back to Shakespeare, it was all in those towns up there. The Merchant of Venice, Romeo and Juliet, all of that. Where did it take place? Here's this British guy writing about
That's right.
this Italian. And I think Maybe because my grandfather would live with me for 3 months every year. Like he'd come out and live with me. And when I say live with me, I mean literally I shared my room with my 90-year-old grandfather.
Oh, my goodness.
You know, and when he would come, and he would go like 3 months to Italy, and he'd worked on the railroad. He'd immigrated in 1900 to America for a better life, and raised his 9 kids, and I think 7 survived. And, you know, nevertheless, he came here to have a better life, right? That's what these stories are about. And if you know your own history, you can resonate with that. Now, mine family history was in the southern part of Italy, but I didn't know the difference between southern Italy and northern Italy at that time.
Sure.
Now I'm much more aware, right? But back then, I was like drinking it down because Grandpa's telling me about Italy. I don't know that the Veneto, that Venice, or, you know, anything in the north is that far from Reggio de Calabria. I don't know that. Like, I guess I could look on the map, on the atlas, and the globe, and those things. But you know, people think that San Francisco is next door to Los Angeles, right? It's 6 hours. You know, it's more than that. But those Shakespeare stories,
Yeah.
and trying to understand the why. So I talked about Paul Westhead, right? It was about the why. Why did Romeo, and why did Juliet, and why did the people who surround them get engaged the way they did? And then you go, when you get older, I don't know if you've done this, but if you go up to that town and you go into Padua, or you go into these different towns where all this stuff happened, and you see where he was writing about, the balcony. It's there. I mean, it's real. It's not like, oh, this guy just was sitting up in London writing about it. No. He was there. There's where that, you know, and you start to realize maybe there was some truth to some of these stories. You talk about stories. These are stories. But it's a different perspective of writing those stories back in that day, right? So what was this English dude writing stories about Italian people?
Yep. It's a great question.
Right? And at the time, you start to think about how were they publishing all this stuff that's getting all over the world so that it becomes impactful. Why did a guy, I think he was from Salinas and The Catcher in the Rye, right? Like, why did that?
Salinger.
Yeah. Is it? I'm not sure if that's exactly where he's from. It seems to me that's what's in my head. But okay.
Where'd that come from?
Right.
Yeah.
Like, and it's a paperback that's, you know, this thick, that high. Yet if you didn't read it, you certainly weren't in basic English. Because everybody had to read it, right? I think they still have to read it.
My 16-year-old last week have to read Catcher of the Rye.
Did he?
He did.
How funny is that, right?
Yep.
So, I don't know. I think it's about the story. Going to your statement moments ago about the story. I think that's why I got drawn in, because they were stories.
So I'm going to make an observation here, and I'm going to be sensitive to time. We'll talk a little longer, and we'll know when this is to conclude. But I had this really interesting thought, and you are a Shakespearean storyteller in the modern age. That's part of what you do with the Rams. You're a storyteller. You draw people in. It's not like, and I'm not here to bang on anybody else and their way that they do their position of broadcasting or whatever, but Sam, you're different.
Yeah.
You're not like, so I was born and raised in Cleveland.
Right.
When I was 8 years old, my dad played for the Bulldogs, which was kind of the farm system of the Browns. He brought me to my first Browns game. Whew. Similar to you and your dad going through the tunnel. We had black and white TV back then. My dad says we're going to go to the Browns game against the Giants. He takes my hand through the tunnel. We come out in Municipal Stadium, and the grass was green.
Right.
And I was like, whoa. They beat the Giants, And then after the game, we went in the locker room. And there's Jim Brown in all his glory with basically nothing on. I'm an 8-year-old kid. I'm just like, these guys were like gods, giants. And the Browns were really good back in the 60s. In fact, I'll tell you a funny story, and just lamenting here. So, gosh, it was a number of years later. I'm playing golf in the Sepulveda Pass at Mountain Gate with a buddy of mine that played for the Lakers at the time. I was playing with him and, I'm blanking on who was the gray-haired coach, Christian, for the Lakers for a time. Wonderful guy. I'll remember his name. We're playing with him in fourth. I slice my ball to another fairway. I'm wearing a Browns, like you got the LMU. I have a little Browns logo on. I got a white shirt with the orange helmet. I slice my ball. I'm walking over to my ball, and I'm about to get up on it, and I see this guy coming at me. And I'm like, hey, big brother. He's walking to me. He goes, hey, that's my ball. And I'm thinking, no, it's my ball. And as I walk up to my ball, I realize, oh, my God, it's Jim Brown.
Wow.
I had to be, 50. I turned into an 8-year-old instantly. Mr. Brown, I met you. You signed your jersey. I don't know where the jersey is, but my dad played for the Bulldogs. I turned into this little kid, had this exchange with him, and he looked at the ball. He goes, yeah, that's your ball. It's not my ball. He walked away. But why do I share that story? Man, life is short. Fatherhood and manhood and growing up as young boys in Southern California, and the blessing that really this town was then and still is. It's changed so much. I mentioned Brady Dunlap to you before we got on air. I coached his dad at North Hollywood in 79-80. He has done his stint of college coaching across the country, had a lot of success with some big names. Came back, coached at CSUN with Mark Gottfried and some others. And when he came back after all these decades, wanting to get back home, he's like, man, this place has changed so much. But there is something about community and home and childhood and just living life and telling stories, writing stories. And my concern is I look at my 16-year-old son. I was an older dad, if you will. I just see their generation. They've fared through so much. COVID, technology now, social media, no real sense of community, that we've kind of lost something. And I think where I'm going, and then I'll be quiet, is, Sam, I think God has positioned you in a way, you probably know it on some level, but you don't take it lightly. And in the LA Times article, I saw that about bringing community back together. God is using you in a way to bring us back together as community. And of all things, it says the announcer of the LA Rams. I mean, what a blessing, and seriously, what a bunch of fun to have that gift and what you do. You just teed me up for like such a great ability just now to say, it's the we, not me. I mean, Sean talks about this a lot. He puts it on the shirts and stuff, but it's so true. It's not just Sean, and it's not just Sean showing up. It's Kevin. It's Mr. Kroenke. I mean, I can't, my hair's going up on my arms right now. Me too.
I can't tell you how incredible that organization is, right? Like, let's face the fact, I'm a part-time guy.
Yeah.
I'm a recurring employee for the most part, right? But within hours, the Rams are calling to check in on me. The Woolsey fire, I was working at Pepperdine. The night before the Woolsey fire, there was a shooting at the borderline. There were a number of Pepperdine students that were in that facility dancing.
My pastor was the mayor of Thousand Oaks. His name is Rob McCoy.
Fabulous job he did in trying to keep that community together.
Yep.
The first thing in the morning, I get a call from Kevin Demoff. Whatever we can do. Wow. we're getting ready for a game that week, right? But whatever we can do. Within hours, I go back to my office, and I'm in what's called the Thornton Administration Building at Pepperdine, which is where my office was. And I hear, as I'm driving back, that a fire started in Bell Canyon. And I remember going over to my friend Lou's office and Claudia's office. They're a little senior to me in terms of, one, their role there, and also their experience, if you will, age. And I said, I think we're going to have a problem because the Santa Anas were blowing. If you know, you know, right? Like if you're in LA, you know what those streams are. And it just goes, whoosh, same thing a couple weeks ago. I then turned around and I think I shot a text to Kevin like, you better pay attention to this because these guys, you know, relatively new back into Los Angeles. And the offices for the Rams was right off of Agoura Road. And they were going to be affected too. But here they were thinking about us. And we had to flip around and think about them, and we had to think about, well, what are we going to do to protect each other? But coming to community, the Rams have done such a great job. So flip that around. Tragedy. Complete tragedy in that borderline.
Yep.
I've got a friend who lost his daughter in that situation. I went up and visited him this last week. They've had to live through the Napa 2017 fires, the 2020 fires up there. They have restaurant businesses up there, and they grew up there. That's their hometown, too. They live in it. The floods. Why did I go up there? I went up there because I wanted to understand, how do you recover? How long is it going to take, right? But the whole time I'm getting phone calls from the Rams. How you doing? You okay? What do you need? You need a new shirt? What do you need? And I was able to, right after the fires, the Rams were supportive of the LA Fire Department Foundation. I was able to help with that. I was able to go get, the Rams created these LAFD hats you may have seen.
I did see Coach wearing them and everybody wearing them.
Right. They gave me a bunch to take to Station 69 and to Station 23 to give them to the firemen to say thank you.
Whew.
To trust me. To give me things from Albertsons, Vons, and Pavilions, $100 cards that I could hand out to my neighbors that don't have any food, that don't have any clothes. They set up $3 million worth of distribution of clothes and pillows down at SoFi Stadium where people could come a week, 10 days after this thing and get it. $3 million worth of stuff. It was unbelievable. And I was able to get extra stuff, not for me, to take to people who don't have anything.
Yeah.
Because I can get to them and I know where they are. They couldn't get, some people are paralyzed.
For sure.
And the Rams, under Kevin Demoff and Stan Kroenke and all of those great people, did this. When we went to that game in Glendale, it was unbelievable. You know?
It was almost as if you were at SoFi too, by the way.
It made it a home game.
And
I was so honored to be invited to make sure that we had the Rams house.
Yeah, that's
to
right.
To bring us back to the beginning when you asked me about that.
Yep.
Building community, and you sort of laid me into this, and maybe this is a good way to get toward an end, but bringing people together is critical. And the Rams LA Together initiative brings people together, all sorts of people. But when we started coming back to Los Angeles, it was kind of organic, was the whole whose house, Rams house. And why? Because that 5-year-old coming through the tunnel with his 50-year-old, 40-something-year-old father, whatever the number is,
yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
What's going to relate them? What's going to relate the person who was a Rams fan since he was 5 and the team was gone and it was hard to track him in St. Louis all the time if you just didn't get into it, but to bring them back. Yet we're also going to have 5-year-olds that are new, and they're going to grow up Rams fans. Today, that 5-year-old is 15.
Yep.
And if he and his mom are supportive of the Rams together and they're going to games or they're following it. How cool is that? Or that 93-year-old that wants to relive the glory days of Roman Gabriel and the fearsome foursome. We're all in this together. We're all in the Rams' house. Whose house? You're part of something special. You're part of the Horns. How do you build people and bring them together? It's those little kinds of things. In our beach volleyball days, we called it the undenied worldwide era. We didn't know whether we were good, bad, or indifferent, but we told them we were undenied worldwide. Even at Notre Dame, one of the things we said is we are the preeminent coeducational Catholic school in the City of Angels.
Wow.
But who can knock us off on that, right?
Yeah, that's right.
Look at the great history, whether it was an all-boys school or into the 80s when it became coeducational, where it is today, and how great are these teachers that are giving these kids a great opportunity. That doesn't mean that Oaks Christian isn't doing a great job. That doesn't mean that Loyola and Marymount and Mater Dei and all these other schools doesn't mean that North Hollywood or Palisades aren't doing their jobs.
Yep.
But here's what we're trying to do. We're trying to live big. Not everybody wants to live big. But if we don't try to live big and go for it all and give glory to God.
That's right.
What are we doing? I don't think you ever want to be out at sea living and wallowing mediocrity.
That's right.
Here, here's a crazy thing. Try to pick this up. No, put it down. I said try to pick it up.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
Did you pick it up?
No.
Okay.
Oh, you're like try, do, or don't do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You're either going to give it a go.
Yeah.
And it's going to work.
Yeah.
Or it's not.
That's right.
You can do it with vigor. Or you could just...
And when you talk about live big, we follow a great God.
Right.
He is it.
Right. And we have, with all of the people in different faith traditions or even non-faith traditions in some cases, we have more in common.
That's right.
Than we do that as a difference.
That's right.
So let's celebrate our commonalities. Let's celebrate what's good about us and how we can bring one another together in the most unique and substantial way. So we can take a phone call off of somebody's phone and say, hey, do you want to go to a game on Saturday? As I did to your friend. But I knew he would love it because every time I see him at a game, he's joyous. Jeff Fryer is joyous to be at that game.
Yeah.
And he doesn't want to be a celebrity.
No, he doesn't. He's as humble as they come.
Right. And he just wants to help these kids in the Philippines play basketball.
Yep.
He wants them to have a good time and he wants them to learn how to live life. And if they're in a different faith tradition than he is, he still embraces them.
That's right.
And that's takes us back to these songs that we learned as kids. And they'll know we are Christians by our love, by our love. Yes, they'll know we are Christians by our love. So let faith, hope, and love lead us to where we can go together. And that's all of us.
Man. I think that may be a good place to call it a day.
Amen.
Even though I've got lots more. Sam, I can't thank you enough for coming on the podcast and how blessed I am to now really getting to know you. Thank you for all you do. Our prayers go out to you and everybody affected by the fires. And, man, the season we're in right now, above all, I got radically saved in 2009. My story is a story. It's a God story, as we all have our God stories. And I just pray on my men's meeting group last night, I prayed specifically for those impacted by the fires, that they, if they don't know who he is, that they would have an encounter and their lives would be changed forever. And we can come together and stop buying the lies of the media, separation and, all of the ploys of the evil one, if you will.
Yeah.
And yet, God's got you in quite a position, my brother.
Let's all be mensches, right? As our Jewish brother says, be a mensch. Like, l'chaim, to life.
There it is.
It's the basis.
Yeah. Amen.
So thanks for having me. This was great to just hang out with you and chat.
Yeah. My blessing.
Let's do it again.
Open invite anytime.
Thanks.
Welcome to come to the barn and hang out.
It's nice.
Second
Great.
time.
I wish I could invite you into the press box, but it's like this sealed environment.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
My wife and my girls have never been in the place that, that I work at the Rams house. So someday.
Do you have a website? People want to find out more about you?
I'd send them to thewoodenaward.com.
Yeah, there you go.
You could learn a lot about a lot of different people and the people that are doing good things and what Coach Wooden's wisdom. Wooden Wisdom is a great place to look if you want to look at another one, woodenwisdom.com. And those are great places for people to go. And there's, again, I hate to think that it would be about me. It's not about me. It's about all these great things that we have got to look at and talk about.
Yeah.
And so we get to share these experiences and it's fun just to be in here, and we get our Dave's over here, right? And so he's with us, and thank you, Dave, for doing what you're doing. And thank you, Frank, for doing what you're doing and bringing people's stories to the opportunity that other people can listen to. And maybe it'll impact somebody, one person.
That's it.
That's okay.
One at a time.
God bless you.
You too.
Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Sam Lagana has been my guest, and we are grateful for you. If you have any thoughts about anything you've seen on this or any past podcasts, obviously reach out to me, franksontag.com. And until next time, we thank you. God bless you. And we're grateful that you are watching this. This is the Frank Sontag Podcast.
Arrive home safely.
Amen.